Hello, I'm Kyle Chambers with Texas Quality Assurance and the Quality Matters podcast. And today we are doing some basic safety training. Today we're going to be talking about fall protection. Specifically, we're looking at working with ladders and elevated platforms. So these are things that are fairly common in a lot of work environments. Most any industrial warehousing type environment, you're going to be running into instances where you have to use ladders or you're working on elevated platforms. And by elevated platforms, I mean what we all call them a scissor lift, right? So we're going to try to use some of the official terminology in here as well, but I also know how horribly dull and boring that can get. So we'll try to keep it as close to real world as possible. But first, I need to go over some basics of legal requirements because ultimately that is why we have to do a lot of these safety trainings is yes, we want to make sure you're safe, but we also have to make sure that we're following the applicable laws and legal requirements in doing so. So bear with me for a moment. We're going to be talking about things related to OSHA. This is the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, 29 CFR. That's just the code of legal requirements. And this is specifically looking at section 1910.23 for ladders, section 1910.27 for scaffolds, ropes, and descent systems, as well as for folks that are involved in the construction industry, CFR 1926.451 for scaffolding general requirements. And the fact is, a lot of general industry folks, this still applies to you. So really kind of who this training is going to be targeting is really this a lot of all the operational staff we're going to be dealing with, our foremen, our supervisors, in warehousing and shipping operations. We're looking at traffic management and, of course, top management as they need to be aware of these issues as well. So let's begin talking about ladder safety. All right, so ladder safety. There are a lot of common causes of ladder failures. And so a lot of this boils down to improper ladder selection. You know, look, I know I've been guilty of it myself, especially when I'm working at home. We've got a farm back home, barn. I mean, you kind of get how it works on a farm sometimes. And I won't lie to you, there have been times where I've grabbed not the tallest ladder necessary. You never want to step on that top step, right? You want to always have what we call a 3-point rule, meaning that at any point in time, you've got a hand and 2 feet, or maybe 2 hands and a foot, but at all times you're on a 3-point contact rule. Not that there are any pictures out there of me way too high up on a ladder. Things, though, that you should never, ever do in the workplace. If you want to take risks at home, that's your business, your prerogative. I can't say I endorse it, but it's your business, your prerogative. When you're on the work site, we can't have any of that. We have to work safely and we have to work appropriately. So always maintain that 3-point contact. Lots of injuries can occur from ladder misuse. I myself even have a scar here on my left arm because I made the mistake of not putting the ladder at the appropriate angle, and I did not have enough of the ladder extending beyond the top of the roof one year when I was putting up Christmas lights. So these things can really matter. Ideally, you want to maintain about a 1-7, no more than a 1-4 ratio of the ladder lean, right? So like if we have a ladder leaning like this, that's too wide. You really want it to be about that 1-7 or 1-4 ratio. That way there's enough of your mass to press down to keep it safe, but we're not going to worry about issues with it slipping out the back end. And that was the case in my personal mistake. We want to make sure that we select, of course, the appropriate type ladder. You want to pay attention to the weights and capacity ratings on these. I know it's things you're probably not used to looking for, but do check, especially if you're hauling loads and materials up the ladder, as I know we all have on occasion and from time to time. The ladder itself should have its capacity actually marked on the ladder. If it is not marked, because this is an old rusty ladder that's been around the facility for years, or maybe it's really cheap, not real sure where it came from, we need to immediately discard that ladder and get a replacement. So we want to talk about ladder inspection. This is very important. Ladder inspection is not something that most facilities require as a documented inspection, but ladder inspection is still important, and it's up to you, the user of the ladder, to make sure that you handle it safely. And so this is kind of a daily pre-use checklist. This is stuff that you should be doing on your own to check it. If you have a safety manager, shop foreman who may be in charge of maintaining the equipment, it's not a bad idea to have a documented checklist, but not legally necessary. But we're going to be looking at, are the steps and rungs, are they in good condition? Do we have any cracks? Do we have any breaks? Do we have any significant wear? We're going to be looking at hardware securement. Are there any bolts or attachment points? Are these secure? I know myself, I have a very long extension ladder that can actually fold out, or we can fold up into an A. And on a regular basis, I have some issues with it, and I have to make sure that it stays lubricated in order that the locking pins can properly lock. If they're not able to flow smoothly along the springs, it's very likely that they could get locked in an unsafe position. So these type of things that you want to check for as well. You also want to make certain that you have your safety feet properly installed. It's something a lot of folks don't always pay attention for, and especially if you're using some older wooden ladders, we don't have any safety feet on these. We want to make certain that the safety feet, these are the ones that can kind of swivel and adjust the angle. They've got the good rubber grips on the bottom. Yes, you may not be accustomed to using these at home, but in the workplace, this is a necessity and is a requirement, and ensures that we're able to operate safely. We want to make sure that, again, we're just going to check the entirety of the ladder. And this isn't a detailed hour-long inspection. This is use your eyes, use your good and better judgment, and we're going to be looking for cracks, warps, or any missing parts. If you identify anything as non-conforming, go ahead and get the ladder marked as do not use, dangerous, and let's get it moved out of the way. Let's go ahead and contact management to make certain that we can get it handled appropriately so that no one else runs into problems. All right, let's talk now about ladder setup and use. Again, I talked about that 4-to-1, no more than a 1-to-7 ratio, but really that 4-to-1 is ideal. And what I mean by that is if you're going up 10 feet, your ladder should be 4 feet from the wall. If you're going up 20 feet, your ladder should be 8 feet from the wall. And this is a really good angle to work at so that, we're not worried that our mass could cause the ladder to tip backwards. Very scary situation, especially if you're working at heights. But if it is too oblique, what's going to happen is the feet are going to fall out, and that's how you wind up with a fun scar on your elbow. Not anything you want to deal with. Thank God it wasn't any worse than this. My roof wasn't that tall, but we run into a lot more scary situations in the work environment, especially when there's heavy equipment and people moving around beneath us. All right. We want to make sure that we always extend 3 feet above the point that we're attaching to. So what that means is, for instance, when I was putting up Christmas lights on the roof, I want to make certain that my ladder goes at least 3 feet beyond the roof. So this does mean that oftentimes we need a ladder much longer than the height that we're trying to work with. And by ensuring that it goes up 3 feet, this does a few things for us. One, it makes certain that we have ample room to get on and off the ladder safely. Two, what if we have just a little bit of a slip? For some reason, the safety feet didn't grab. Maybe someone bumped the ladder. God forbid things like that happen. But that also gives us a little bit of margin of error there for our own personal safety. You want to make certain that the ladder is always on firm, level, and slip-resistant surfaces. This does not mean go start getting wood shims and putting under one foot of the ladder if it can't sit safely. If it can't sit safely, levelly, and firmly, we don't use it until we correct our work environment. And yes, that may mean we've got to do some work to get a good, stable platform to put our ladder on and a nice location for it to go up to. If it means a little bit of extra work to stay safe, go for it. All right. We want to make certain that we are climbing properly. As I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we have a 3-point contact at all times. This does not mean being He-Man walking up legs only, no hands. We want to make certain that we are operating in a safe manner. So for that reason, tool belts and caddies and carrying objects by hand can sometimes get in the way. So we want to make certain that we're careful about that. We want to make certain as well that you never lean to overreach. So what I mean by that is if you're on the ladder, we're not leaning across the ladder to get something. That's unsafe. That's going to change the center of balance of us. That's going to change the center of balance of the ladder and potentially introduce a hazardous situation where you're going to fall to the ground and get hurt. Not something we want to worry about. Ladders, a lot of you don't know, are a single person piece of equipment. We don't put 2 or 3 people on a ladder, one guy at a time. Yes, I know this is a long ladder and we've got many trips to make up and down the ladder. This can slow down the job a little bit. That, unfortunately, is not my problem, nor is it even yours. Your problem is that you need to operate safely. So if the job takes a little bit more time to ensure that we're operating safely, that's what we want to look for. All right. Last thing on kind of these major safety issues with working with ladder is no one should ever be underneath the ladder. God forbid someone drop a tool, the ladder were to fall, or someone were to bump into it. You never, ever walk underneath a ladder. So just like you probably remember when you were a kid that it's bad luck to walk under a ladder, I don't know that I believe in superstitions and bad luck, but I do know that it's a bad practice to walk underneath the ladder, so never do it. And if that means that you have to take a longer route around the shop or around the work site to get to where you need to go, you just need to take a longer route around the job site to get where you need to go. Whew. Okay, that's enough about ladders. Now we're going to move on to elevated platforms. We're talking here about scaffolds, and we're talking about scissor lifts. All right, scaffolds. Biggest issues you can run into, obviously, falling. We want to make certain that these are also constructed by competent authorities, that we have all of the safety features installed. This training isn't so much on the construction of scaffolds, but just know that there are proper ways to install, and we need to make sure that those procedures have been followed. Another hazard of a scaffold is structural collapse. Too much weight on these, improper installation can cause a structural collapse. So anytime you're working on scaffolds, do recognize you're literally working on pipes of metal bolted together. Let's treat it with the respect it deserves. Electrocution is actually a very common issue that occurs with scaffolds because these are large metal structures. And there's a large opportunity for connectivity with things from power lines. If we've got an electrician working in the area. So make certain that you check the surroundings of the scaffolding before climbing on top of it, just to ensure that there are no new or unintended hazards that have been introduced into the work area. And the last real big hazard of a scaffold, quite similar to ladders, is falling objects. We have people working on top elevated platforms with tools. This presents an obvious risk for impact from a falling object. Now, scaffolds do require an annual training. You have to get this done at least annually. Ladders, on the other hand, this is typically a one-time training. We show you how to do it. As long as you have any issues, we're good. But when it comes to scaffolding, you do have to have an annual training on these. We want to make certain that a qualified person is involved in the scaffold design, erection, inspection, just like I mentioned earlier. And just like with ladders, scaffolds have load limits. Do not exceed these load limits. They are there for a reason. Again, you may say at home or in other jobs, I've done it this way, I didn't worry about it. We don't care. The fact is, if it has a load limit, it's there for a reason. It was developed by an engineer who did a lot of math that I probably don't understand myself, and he came up with a good limit as to how much weight we can put on these before we risk any sort of structural issues or collapse. And I'm certain none of you want to go home and have to tell your spouse or significant other that you're going to be out of work for a few weeks because you took too many bags of concrete on top of the scaffold and you fell and broke your leg. Maybe not a conversation you want to have. Definitely not one I'd want to have. So stay safe. Last thing here on scaffolds is same thing as with ladders. We're not leaning off of them. We're not going to shore them or lean them up against a building. They are engineered, they're erected in a certain way, and we work atop the platform. We are not overreaching to get the job done. Now, we do have to do some inspections of these. These are also pre-shift inspections, and we're going to do a post-event inspection. So if there's significant weather events, impact, these things happen, or if we had to conduct a repair on it, we want to make certain that we have reviewed these as well. So these pre-shift inspections should be completed by a competent authority who is qualified to erect the scaffolds. So that's not quite under the topic of today's training, but we want to make certain that it's conducted. And just like with ladders, we're looking for obvious signs of wear: cracks, warps, bends, missing bolts, missing components. If you see any of these, immediately raise red flag to management. Let's go ahead and get it marked as do not use, that it is dangerous. All right. When we're working on scaffolding, they're prohibited work conditions, right? So if it's snowing, if it's icy, If there's slippery surfaces, I myself don't want to be atop a bunch of steel pipe. Don't really want to work on it. Even if I've got a nice platform on top, we're not going to work on it in these hazardous conditions, period. We want to maintain at least a 10-foot clearance from power lines. You know, I don't know how many of you have ever seen the videos of when like a kid's kite gets caught on these, or when they fall to the ground and start sparking, but it's not anything you want to play around with. So make sure we maintain a minimum of a 10-foot clearance from power lines. Also, this is one I've seen people make mistakes before on. You don't put ladders on scaffolds unless they were specifically designed, engineered, and approved for that purpose. If you don't immediately know that they were designed and approved for that purpose, odds are they weren't. So don't take the risk. You should only do this at the direction of your shop foreman, supervisor, safety manager, or other authority. And again, request, is this ladder approved for use on this scaffold? All right, platform requirements. One of the things you have to think about is load deflection limitations. And so what that means is, again, scaffolds are largely metal pipes bolted together. They're going to sag, just like any metal does. It's going to sag. Well, how much are we allowed to have before it's unsafe? I mean, we all know that metal pipe's going to bend. That's one of the things that makes it so wonderful, is that it's ductile. But what we're looking for is a 1:60 ratio in the span, meaning if we have a 60-foot long span and the bottom has gone down more than 1 foot from the edge, no good. It's not safe. We can't use it. So keep that in mind. And then also basic stuff, housekeeping. We don't want debris on the platform. We want it to be a clean and safe work area. All righty, let's talk about some kind of general environmental safety controls that we need to worry about. So part of this is ventilation. In a previous life, I was a safety manager, and in career before that, I was actually a network admin, and I was assigned the wonderful task of running network cable in the very top of the shop. And let me tell you, the temperature when you're about 30 feet up in a metal building is quite different than the temperature when you're at, 5-6 foot standing in the metal building. So we want to make certain that we can keep doors, windows, and everything open where possible to keep good airflow moving through the area. Definitely avoid idling vehicles in the area that you're working in. A lot of times ladders and scaffolds are erected inside large metal buildings, warehouse operations, and things of the nature. And an idling vehicle is going to be releasing noxious gases on a very regular basis, specifically carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. And you can't smell these. You can't detect them. What you detect is you die. And by the time that happens, it might be a little bit too late. So let's make certain that we're not idling vehicles in the work environment. Nothing wrong with mechanical ventilation. This means fans. Fans are a wonderful, wonderful tool to make sure that we've got good airflow moving through there. You also want to ensure adequate lighting. There was a shop years ago that I was auditing, and I actually had to tell the shop, I'm done with the audit. I'm leaving. I won't return until y'all can fix some safety issues, because they had so much equipment stacked so high that it was blocking out the light in the warehouse. And I just didn't feel comfortable in the facility. So we want to make certain that we've always got adequate lighting, especially when we're working at heights, folks. This is what's really scary, is if you're working at heights and you can't see well, that's just not a good combination. We want to make sure that we immediately replace any failed lighting. This does mean this is a stop work type situation. We've got a bulb out. I can't see properly. Let's go ahead and get that replaced before we continue operations. Okay, so let's talk about some basic PPE. So with PPE, when we're working on elevated work, whether this is scaffolds, man lifts, ladders, whatever the case may be aware of the PPE that's necessary in the environment. Going up an elevated platform does not negate the requirement for PPE. So if we've got our standard steel toe, safety glasses, whatever the case may be, make certain that we're following those as well. If we are working at a level above, depending on if you're general industry or construction, just consult your local safety manager or foreman there. If you're above either 4 or 6 feet, and this is the case when you're working with a scissor lift, harness fall protection is always required. You want to make sure that you've got a harness, you've got the lanyard, the cable that hooks to your harness, and a proper fall arrest system. And so that fall arrest system, what that means is that when you fall, you're not just going to smack hit the end of the lanyard when you fall. We actually want it to slow you down some. And there's a variety of systems for this as well. Make sure that you've inspected the harness, the lanyard, and any PPE before donning and working in elevated platforms. God forbid we do have an incident occur. Be aware before the work starts what the incident reporting chain is. Who's the first person we need to notify? Do we have safety or medical attention available? If not, does someone know who to contact in the event of an emergency? Always notify your immediate supervisor first. They're going to be your best bet to getting help immediately. If there is an incident investigation process available, the immediate supervisor should be aware of it, and it's a good idea for you to be aware of the process as well. So it never hurts to ask questions about what if type scenarios. Following this, there may be what we call corrective actions and things like that. So if there is an incident, you may be asked questions and information on it, and the company's just trying to understand what went wrong so that they can put better controls in place in the future to prevent this from happening again. But, that's really kind of the basics of working at heights. We want to make certain that we're working safely and we're maintaining just a good awareness of our environment and following some really basic safety practices, and go home in the same condition you came to work in. So that's it. Again, I'm Kyle Chambers with the Quality Matters podcast and Texas Quality Assurance, and hope this is helpful to you.